Hey, are you ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content? Well, welcome to Influential Voices of Authority, the podcast for coaches, consultants, and experts who are ready to stop being the best-kept secret in their niche and become the sought-after authority. I'm your host, Erik K. Johnson, podcast talent coach and media veteran. In every episode, I sit down with industry leaders and visibility experts to uncover how they use their voice, their message, and their platform to build trust, grow their audience, and attract premium clients. If you're ready to turn your voice into your greatest asset, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Influential Voices of Authority. This week, I have a fantastic guest on the show for you. Did you know that using artificial intelligence platforms for your podcast to edit and to repurpose your interview episodes could be putting you at legal risk? Yeah, it's true. That's why we've invited Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, on the show today. Because unless you have the proper agreements in place, you don't really have permission to upload that interview to ChatGPT or CastMagic or Opus.pro or any of the other artificial intelligence platforms that you're using. Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, says there are a variety of risks using AI to produce, edit, and repurpose your episodes. I know a lot of podcasters who use AI to generate show outlines and give them show ideas. The challenge is that AI is using a lot of information it's learned from other platforms and people to produce that information for you. Well, that information is copyrighted. So the first issue is the issue of copyright. If you are using AI to help you create content, you have no idea where AI is getting that information. And that information could very well be copyrighted by somebody else. You could be violating the copyright law without even knowing it, just because you're using ChatGPT or some other AI platform to help you create that content. If you're using AI to help you generate content, generate the ideas, you don't know where that content has originated. The second issue is publicity rights. Now, publicity rights are the right to use your name and likeness for publicity. The law protects the rights of authenticity. That means you aren't allowed to create fakes of another's voice or image. And that's been seen a lot on YouTube and in music and that sort of thing. Matter of fact, actor Matthew McConaughey has just recently taken legal steps to protect his publicity rights against AI-generated deepfakes. He trademarked his voice and his likeness, and AI could open you up to using some of those things without you realizing. And AI could also open you up to a defamation charge. Now, defamation is defined as the act of spreading false statements about a person or organization that causes harm to their reputation. Now, if you're not fact-checking all of the information generated by AI, you could be putting yourself at risk. If your AI platform is providing you information about someone that's untrue and you're not fact-checking all of that information, you could end up in serious legal trouble. Now, those are just three of the potential issues using artificial intelligence. Now, one other potential problem comes from your interviews, and that's permission. Because when you upload an interview to an AI platform, that platform uses that interview and information in a variety of ways, most of which you're completely unaware. The AI platform is learning through everything that's uploaded to it. And every AI platform is different on how they do that and how that machine learning happens. But the platform then uses that knowledge to create output for everyone else that's using that platform in a variety of ways. And because you've taken somebody's interview with you, their intellectual property, and you've now uploaded it to AI, which is now using it for machine learning, you've now potentially violated the copyright of the person that you just interviewed if you don't have permission to upload that interview into that artificial intelligence platform. And it could put you at great legal risk. And it's something that most of us don't even consider, which is why I've invited Gordon Firemark on the show today. He is amazing when it comes to this. Not only are we going to get into the risks of using AI for your podcast, we're going to talk about his journey from law school through the entertainment industry to becoming the podcast lawyer. He's built his authority using a couple shows, and he's being a guest on a variety of shows as well. He's been able to grow his authority and become known as the podcast lawyer. Gordon is an entertainment attorney who helps creatives and entrepreneurs protect themselves and make smart business moves so they can take bold action toward impact, influence, and the income they deserve. It's a great interview. You're going to get a lot from it. Enjoy my conversation with Gordon Firemark. Gordon, it's great to see you, buddy. Thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.
Hey, Eric. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about the day you launched your podcast and what that was like for you.
Gosh, it's a long time ago. I sort of don't remember the exact day, but it was exciting. It was fun. I had arranged with a co-host and all that. This is 2009 when we did this, so it's been a long time. And podcast was something very few people knew about. People didn't know what they were, didn't know how to do it. I was listening to Leo Laporte and those guys. That's how I figured it out. And of course, Cliff Ravenscraft, then the podcast Answer Man, taught me through his podcast how to do it. And so it was a very exciting moment. But what was really exciting was a few weeks later, looking at the stats and seeing how many people had gotten to listen. So.
Yeah, what was that like when you looked at the stats and you were like, holy cow, we actually have listeners?
Yeah. The show Entertainment Law Update, it's really targeted at other entertainment lawyers and students and things like that. And, within a few weeks, through a email campaign and postcards and putting some ads in trade publications, we got about 1,000 listeners for that first episode.
Oh, wow.
Sad to say, it's been sort of consistently, we've doubled that, but it's been consistently in that range ever since. But when you think about the number of people in the world who actually do entertainment law for a living, we've got a sizable chunk of that audience. So
yeah, 2009, there was probably 500, 600 podcasts at the time. I would think there weren't very many.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was in that range of several hundred, and then it grew exponentially over the next 10 years or so, and then ballooned in 2020, of course.
Yeah, when I was looking at jumping in 2012, 2013, right in there, I think there were about 800, 850. We hadn't broken 1,000 yet. I remember the day we broke the 1,000 podcast mark there in 2013-ish or whatever it was, and people were going crazy. And now we're up to, 4 million or whatever it is today. It's been nuts.
Well, let's be realistic about the 4 million. The stats show that a good 3.5 million of those probably aren't producing episodes regularly.
Absolutely. So. I pulled up one the other day. It was recommended. Actually, I heard about it at Podfest. It was called Save the Cat. And he teaches script writing for Hollywood. Yeah. And I went and looked, and he hadn't published an episode since 2019. And he only published one in 2019. He published one in 2018. And he had published a couple in 2017. They just pod fading is yes, pod fading is a true phenomenon. Yeah. So how do you go from a law degree and transform into the podcast lawyer? How does that happen?
Well, I had a background in sound tech in live theater and a little bit of recording. I'd done some radio and stuff. So law was actually my second career direction. And
what was the first? Where were you going? Where did that theater radio background want to take you?
So I started college as a theater major, but that was more of a performance-oriented program, and I was a behind-the-scenes guy. So that wasn't right for me. So I ended up moving into radio, TV, and film as a major. Came out of college and was working in the television field I was a producer of live sports coverage and events and things like that. And law school was a bit of an afterthought. The idea had come up while I was still in college, but I decided not to go. And then there was a strike in the entertainment industry in the late '80s, and that's when I decided to go to law school. So for me, as I was launching and building my law practice over those years, I was looking for the right way to market the practice.
Was it
And
always entertainment law?
always entertainment law, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So there I was trying to find a way to market my practice, and I'd started blogging really before blog was even a term. But I had built this, coded my own database-backed website, and then of course, a month later, out comes WordPress to make everything easy.
Yes, right.
But then I discovered Leo Laporte's show and saw what he was doing. He had migrated over from Tech TV at the time, and that led me to think, oh, that's cool. I could do that. And the rest is history.
Yeah. You've done a lot with the blog and on TV and producing shows and
Yeah.
stuff, and now with the podcast. And you've worked with a lot of content creators in your law practice. How do you see creators growing their authority and turning their channels, whether it's podcast or video or blog, turning their content into a true business and an enterprise that's really platform agnostic, like you've done, that it doesn't
Yeah.
depend on podcast or TV or video?
Well, the way I look at it is that the content that I create is the top level of that sales and marketing funnel, right? It isn't the end in and of itself. It's not the product. It's the attention getter, I guess you could say. If you can capture people's attention with information that they want that solves an immediate need or problem for them, or just informs and educates them in a way, then that builds the know, like, and trust factors
Yeah.
that are so important. And sure, advertising, podcast ads or AdSense on YouTube, those kinds of things is a revenue stream. But we have to be honest, unless you've got millions and millions of downloads or followers, you're not going to be generating life-changing income.
Yes.
So the thing to do is to use these content strategies, education-based marketing, we used to call it, as a way of attracting that attention, building that trust and affinity, and then selling our own products and services. Or a lot of folks have success with affiliate sales. Selling other people's products and services works as well. So what really matters, I think, is having the alignment between what you're selling and what your audience is about, what your show is about sometimes, and things like
Yeah.
that. So,
Helping them solve a problem.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what every product really is. And every successful product,
Right.
identify a problem the market has and fill it better than anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the concept of entertaining so you can get attention, and get attention so you can turn that into revenue. Because people who have the attention of an audience can usually generate revenue. And it doesn't need to be a large audience. It just needs to be an interested audience. It needs to be that
Absolutely.
audience. So I see a lot of people out there. It's kind of the Wild West, right? The barrier to entry is so low that,
Yeah.
you have an iPhone, you can be on YouTube in a matter of minutes. But a lot of people are just shooting from the hip, and they don't really take into consideration the legal protection that they need, because it's so easy to get in. And so if they're going out and they're taking bold action, they're creating their impact, they're creating their authority, they're generating that income, what are some of the foundational legal protections they need to be aware of as they're doing that?
Well, I talk about sort of 4 different pillars of these foundational legal protections that you're talking about. The first of them is having some kind of a business entity container for what you're doing. Now, not every podcaster or creator needs that, especially if you're doing it in a business that's already existing. But there's something to be said for that legal separation between the individual or the business that you run and the podcast content itself.
What would those be? What would be considered a business container?
Well, a corporation or a limited liability company is typical. But it could, well, the problem is you don't want to be characterized as a sole proprietor or partnership in order to deal with liability, right? So if the podcast does generate some kind of liability for some reason, either somebody's reputation gets hurt or you accidentally or intentionally infringe a copyright or a trademark or something like that, and there's a lawsuit, you don't want them coming after your house and your cars and your pension plan and your business, those kinds of things. So that's what I talk about, the legal separation. There are other.
So if you have a corporation, they're suing the corporation and you're protected. But if you're doing business as, you're a sole proprietor, you're a partner, then they can sue all of the entities. Yeah. They sue you and your partner.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, the truth is they probably sue you individually also, but having the LLC or the corporation gives you a legal defense tool that can shield the individual. So
is there a point in time in terms of revenue or attention or anything where you go, okay, now's the time to become a corporation?
Yeah, that's more of a question for the accountants, to be honest. At what point in your particular situation does your income justify setting up these protections? Because there is a cost associated with running a corporation or an LLC, but that changes and varies from state to state. And so I hesitate to give a hard number, but I would say once you're approaching the low six figures, it's a must.
Of income or net worth?
Of income.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay. Good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So you have your legal entity. What else do we need to be considered with?
Well, we have to think about the team, the people who are working with us, assuming we have a team. And even if we don't really, we need to have this consciousness in our mind that everybody who touches our show is potentially a point of liability, but also they may find themselves, or they may think of themselves as a co-owner of things, even if you're paying them, even, those things. Though, unfortunately, the way the law works in copyright law is that anyone who contributes any component of authorship is considered a joint author, or can be considered a joint author. So it's important to have everybody who touches your show signing a contract that says, no, you own it. It's a work made for hire language contract.
Give me an example. Do you have an example of a client you've worked with that has fallen into that trap without realizing it?
Sure. Yeah. A fellow he actually had started a whole podcast network, and they talked about a bunch of different TV shows. Each podcast was a different weekly show following up on a television show. And one of those shows, he would bring on co-hosts pretty regularly to talk about this very, very popular show. And eventually one of those co-hosts sort of rose to the top and became the regular co-host. And those guys, they ended up having a disagreement about how they were going to monetize this show. Now they're in their, 7th or 8th season of the TV show, and things are going really well, big audience. One of them wants to do sort of Patreon style. The other one wants to do ads. And they were butting heads about this. So the guy who had the network, who had founded the thing and started the show, said to the co-host, hey, we'll do it your way. It's your show. Don't worry about it. We'll do it your way. Well, It's Your Show turned out to be the trigger that said, oh, it's my show. I'm taking it to a different network.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up having to hire lawyers and fighting over it. It took about a year. Meanwhile, the show was not publishing, and they're locked out of each other's accounts and things like that. And it sort of killed the show eventually. I mean, the TV series went on for a couple more years, but the show sort of never recovered. And it ended up being a 6-figure payout to one of them had to buy the other out and that kind of thing. So getting it in writing.
So is solving that just a matter of a quick memorandum of understanding, or do you have to put like a full legal contract in place for something like that?
Well, I mean, you can do it with a quick memorandum of understanding. The risk is that you leave things out that become trouble spots later on.
Didn't think about
fight. So, I mean, the good news is these don't have to be really long contracts. I call this a podcast prenup, basically.
Okay.
It just sort of lays out the relationship between the parties and who gets what if things go wrong, or if someone needs to leave or needs to be shown the door, or isn't pulling their weight, or those kinds of things. It's about setting expectations as much as anything else. And as often as not, creators get together and they're creative. They don't want to have that conversation, or they just don't think to have that conversation. So part of my mission is just, let's get people talking about these things while the relationships are solid, rather than when they're starting to break down.
I was talking to a client the other day about launching her podcast, and she wants to do it with two co-hosts.
Hmm.
And I warned her of this very thing
Yeah.
because I've worked with people, it's always going to come to an end. And so let's define what that end looks like before we
Yeah.
even start. Because I had a client who came to me, he had a show, very successful show,
Hmm.
and then eventually brought on a co-host, and the two of them did it together, had a falling out, and the new co-host took the show, the name, the platform, and everything,
Yeah.
and ran with it on his own and basically blocked my client out, and my client had to start from scratch just because they didn't discuss it from the beginning.
Seen that happen dozens and dozens of times. Most of the time, neither party has the stomach for a six-figure,
Yeah.
check. But yeah, any legal fight is an expensive fight, so we
Well,
want to
and we
avoid
don't
that.
we don't want to think it's going to end, but it will always end at some point. And so let's
Yeah,
talk about what that looks like before we jump in.
and it's even important if the end is that somebody dies, right? Because now
Yes.
your partner is your former partner's spouse, or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, it just makes sense to lay these things out in a business-like way, and it's about being business-like ultimately.
So we have the business entity, we have the
Uh-huh.
people, the team that's
Hmm.
involved. What else are we looking at?
Well, the intellectual property is the one that people do tend to think about, but they tend not to fully understand how intellectual property works. So, one of the things that I mentioned about copyright law working such that, you know, you may have more than one author and therefore more than one owner. So, again, being careful about that, but also being careful just about when you have, well, your guests, for example, that's part of that prenup side of things actually is having
Right.
an agreement with your guests. And we can talk more about that in a few minutes. But the intellectual property, the copyrights, the trademarks, and the secrets are things we worry about. Protecting your own copyrights, fortunately, is very easy, but being wary and careful about how you approach other people's stuff. And every piece of music, every film, every book, every poem written in the last 95 years, we should expect that it's protected by copyright. So we
Right.
need permission to use those things.
Well, I love how people talk about fair use, like, oh, I'm
Mm.
using it fair use. Well, that doesn't mean people still can't sue you, right?
Right.
If you feel like you have the deep pockets to go to court and fight fair use, then by all means knock yourself out. But it's not whether or not you're right; it's whether or not you can spend the money to prove you're right.
Right. How much justice can you afford?
Yes, exactly,
Which is,
exactly.
it's tragic that I have to say that, and it's become a joke, but it really is the way our legal system seems to operate nowadays.
Yeah,
The,
absolutely.
so the real game plan is let's avoid the problem in the first place. Fair use is a valid defense in copyright cases, but it's a defense. You're being sued by the time you get to really talk about it.
Right.
There are some situations where you can sort of predict and expect that, yes, it's going to look like fair use, and no, nobody's going to bother me about this. But those are actually much fewer and farther between than you think. Not a week goes by that I don't hear somebody calls up my office and says, "Hey, somebody's threatening me. I think it's fair use. What do you say?" And I say, "Well, how much justice can you afford?" You know?
Yeah, right. Right.
So,
It's not black and white. It's very gray,
yeah.
and you have to go in and have that conversation. When it comes to copyright, do I have to copyright every episode with the copyright office, or do I copyright my podcast and then it's each episode is therefore copywritten?
Well, each episode is protected by copyright. Copyright isn't really a verb, so I don't like that word copywritten.
Copyrighted,
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Well, it's protected by copyright. So the
protected.
way copyright law works is the moment you create the work, you own it. You own a copyright in it.
Yeah.
Maybe jointly, maybe, under other circumstances, but you're an owner from the moment of the creation. The registration of the copyright is how you sort of perfect that ownership and prove to the outside world that you're the owner of this copyright. And that, usually just involves basically telling the Copyright Office, the division of the Library of Congress, actually, you tell them, here's who the owner is, here's when it was created, here's any disclaimers that are necessary, those kinds of things. It's a relatively simple process. The problem is it costs a little money each time. Registration is about $65 per work. So
Okay.
doing it for every episode just added a significant expense to your weekly production costs, right?
Yes.
So most people don't. I would say you register your cornerstone episodes. If you've got episodes that are likely to be copied and reproduced and and used for other things, then I would say register those. And maybe it's not a bad idea to register other episodes if you have a famous guest or something like that, those kinds of things. But it's good to know that the protection is in place from the very beginning of creation of the work. The issue is you can't file a lawsuit unless you've registered copyright in that particular episode that's been infringed.
Can you retroactively copyright an episode? Like if I can prove I created it in
Oh
2022,
yeah,
can I create the copyright today for back in 2022?
you can register the work the day you file the lawsuit.
Got it.
But
Okay.
the thing about it is that there are some provisions in the copyright law that say you can get your attorney's fees paid and you can get what are called statutory damages, where you don't have to actually prove your losses. But you can only get those if the copyright was registered within 3 months of the first publication of the work.
Okay.
And there's a bit of argument and legal wrangling around what's publication. But I would say if your episode is available to be played on the typical podcast players, then it's been published. And so, the 3-month rule is sort of the important marker. Now, if you are operating an enterprise level podcast, then I'd say yes, register every episode. Just make it a part of the process. But it's a cost benefit analysis. What are the odds that this is going to get copied, and is it worth $65 to me? That's really
Right, right. And if people are sharing your stuff and copying it and sharing it, if it's you and it's helping you with publicity, I can see just ignoring it. But they're actually taking and reworking your material as their own, then that becomes a challenge. Do you have to? Is it required that you fight every copyright use, or can you pick and choose which ones you enforce?
There's a principle in the law called, equitable estoppel, or latches is the legal term. And this is the idea that if you don't do something to protect your rights, you could lose them. If you sit on your rights, you lose them.
Yeah.
So it is important that if you discover someone infringing your work, whether it's copyright or trademark, which we should talk about also, then you should do something about it. Now, that doing something may just be writing them a letter. Hey, I know you're doing this, and you should have asked me permission. Would you like permission? And then they get them to ask, and then you give it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one approach. Or send a cease and desist letter, or do a DMCA takedown, and you've done your thing. But just not doing anything or giving what we call a naked license is not enough to preserve those protections. And the real issue is that somebody else later comes along and says, well, you didn't go after them. Why are you coming after me?
Okay.
So
you mentioned here in this intellectual property part, trademark versus copyright.
Yeah.
Copyright is content that you've created. Trademark is for what purpose?
Okay, well, let me back up a little bit. So what intellectual property is products of the mind, the things that are intangible generally. So that's things like the way we worded a particular phrase, or the way the recording of a show, the expression of ideas. Okay. The underlying ideas themselves aren't really protected, but the way we've chosen to express them and embody them is. That's copyright. Trademark is about the brand name, about the title of the show, or the Nike swoosh, or the words "just do it." I don't know why I chose Nike, but there they go. Amazon, the logo design of Amazon, but also just the word in exchange, for retail stores and things like that. Those are brands, right? And that's worth protecting. I say that the title of your show is your brand identifier, and it's important that we protect that. So that's trademark law.
So back to my question earlier about do I trademark? Can I copyright the show, or do I need to copyright every episode? It sounds like from that description there, I would trademark the show, copyright the episodes.
You can trademark the title of the show. You can trademark the segments of the show if you have specific,
the artwork, the logo.
Yeah, well, the
like
artwork and logo is probably, could be both copyright and trademark, right?
Okay.
So the design of the artwork is copyright, but the way it's used as a brand identifier for your show is a trademark. So trademark is any distinctive word, phrase, symbol, logo, those kinds of things that is attached to a particular set of goods, as an indicator of where they're coming from.
What's the craziest thing someone's tried to copyright or trademark through you, and you're like, I don't know if this is gonna fly, but we'll give it a whirl.
Well, through me, it hasn't been a lot of craziness. It's mostly,
Okay.
like I said, these titles and things like that. But recently in the news, you might have heard that Matthew McConaughey registered a trademark for his trademark, well, his phrase, all right, all right, all right.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
his name and some images and video of him performing various movements and things like that. That's a pretty unusual and extraordinary thing. We're going to see how he got them registered. Now we'll see how it works if there's ever a need to sue one of these AI companies. That's what he's trying to protect against. So there are some pretty crazy ones out there. Harley Davidson was able to register the sound of the rumbling muffler.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
MGM, the sound of the lion's roar at the beginning of the movie, is a registered trademark.
Wow.
So it is pretty interesting to see them used in these unusual ways. But for creators, it's mostly the title of your show or the name of your channel or the handle you use on social media, some of those kinds of things.
So the three pillars we've covered so far:
Yeah.
business entity, your team, your intellectual property, and then what's that fourth pillar?
Well, the fourth one is the contracts, the deals you make with with everybody really, but especially the advertisers, or when you're hiring an independent contractor to come in and film you or do artwork or design, just having good, well-crafted contracts that protect and do the job, whatever that job may be. So I like to characterize it as the advertiser or the deals with the sponsors or the people who are actually paying you money, because that's worth protecting for sure.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
contracts is just an agreement. They're synonyms.
Well,
So
the more work you do at the beginning, the less pain you'll have when problems arise.
yeah, one of the things that a lot of folks object to about using contracts, all these things, even the guest release,
Yeah.
is it's going to put them off. They're going to feel like it's too businessy. And my response to that is they should feel like it's businessy. There's a business
Yes.
component here. It projects a kind of professionalism that you are checking all these boxes on a checklist and doing things right.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be surprised if you're going to be featured on a television show if they ask you to sign a contract or release of some sort. Why would you be surprised if you're coming on a podcast? It's media production,
Yeah.
and media producers need to protect themselves and set those expectations.
Yeah. We have the right to use your name and likeness to promote our products or the show or
Hmm.
whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Um, Go ahead.
in this area, the consent to record and the consent to edit the content and the consent to publish the content are really important. And that's why I always, I'm on a crusade to get everybody who has guests to use a release contract.
Yeah, just make it part of the deal, part of the
Yeah.
business, and it as people um, give more interviews, they'll be accustomed to
Yeah.
signing the document that
Yeah.
allows you to use their name and likeness. You mentioned a thing in your talk at Podfest
Mm.
about getting permission to use artificial intelligence to edit the show.
Yeah.
And something I had not considered. Tell me how that opens you up for liability if you're using an interview with somebody and you're uploading it to an artificial intelligence platform.
Yeah. Even something as sort of custom, what's the word I'm looking for, as mundane as like Descript or something, right?
Yeah.
The fact of it is, you're taking a recording of a person's voice, which is technically biometric data about them, and there are a lot of states that have very rigid protections of biometric data. You're uploading that to a third-party source that you may or may not know all of their how they operate and what they're doing with things and so on, and that requires a specific consent. And then the edit itself, I think you need some consent just to do an edit. And guests are rightfully concerned that you're going to change the meanings of the words they said and things like that. So you have to. I generally say, promise not to do that in exchange
Yes.
for the consent to use these tools, which obviously just make our lives much easier and clean things up and polish. But I mean, I've heard about guests that complained that the noise reduction and equalization was enough to change the way their voice sounded, and they were
Wow.
objecting to
Really?
that. Yeah. So
Give me an example of somebody that's got into legal wranglings with AI and the manipulation.
well, I don't have a specific example other than what I just said. Is this one person, and I don't know how it ended up turning out, but
Okay.
the host of the show called me and said I had this guest who complained that because we took off some of the high end and rolled up the bass a little bit and things like that, that I made them sound like a different person. And
Interesting.
I think that was somebody either just being very sensitive or having cold feet after the fact and wanting the episode not to be published. But
Yeah.
anyway, and in that situation, that particular host hadn't had a release signed. So my advice had to be, well, if they're willing to sue you over it, you might actually have a problem because consent can be revoked unless unless you have a written contract that says it's irrevocable.
Yeah.
So that if for no other reason right there, that's the reason to have a good, well-crafted guest release in there.
You've been doing your podcast since 2009. Give me an example of a big opportunity that has come your way or a big door that's opened because you have your podcast.
Well, that's good because of Entertainment Law Update, which is that podcast. I have a couple of others, but I've been asked to speak at legal conferences all over the world. I've been identified as a real expert in my field of entertainment and media law, particularly podcast law. Because of that, I've received a few awards in the legal field. So it's been pretty good for my reputation and my practice. I won't say any of them is a giant opportunity. It's not, none of it is life-changing money, but it's allowed me to have a law practice that focuses on an area that I love, on people that I enjoy working with. And really allowed me to build a business of my own specification.
If you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
I think I probably wouldn't have started a show with a narrow niche audience of entertainment lawyers where I'm actually essentially educating my competition.
Oh, right.
I probably would have done something a little more client facing or potential
Okay.
client facing. So that's an important thing we have to think about is being strategic about the kind of show, about what kind of show we're going to do and who it's for and so on. I think when I started it was just, I'm going to market my law practice. That was the reason to do the show. But if you don't go in with a solid why am I doing this? Then who's for and what problem does it solve? You should be able to answer those three questions before you ever press a record button.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. I love using your podcast guest release form. It makes things so easy. We're all on the same page as we're heading into an interview. Would you be willing to share that with the audience?
Absolutely. As I said, I'm on a crusade. So everybody should use a guest release for every guest. I say it's like safe, you know what? It's safe guest.
Safe guest.
Use one every time.
Very good.
If you'd like to get the lawyer drafted podcast guest release that I recently customized for the AI era, you can head on over to podcastrelease.com and download it. And that'll bring you into my orbit and onto my mailing list. And you can opt out at any time. But I hope I'm providing some valuable information that'll be useful beyond that.
I love the follow-up series. Typically the nurture sequence that comes after a download like that is just like, hey, buy more of my stuff. The thing I love about the nurture sequence that comes after downloading the release form is exactly how to use it. Like how to put it in front of people, how to bring it up to your guest, where to put it in the process of booking them for your show. Like it's so clear and easy to use. I love it, and it's incredibly valuable. You can get that at podcastrelease.com and download that today. Gordon, thanks for being here. I always learn a ton every time we talk. I appreciate you taking a little time out of your day for us.
Erik, thanks so much for having me. It's been fun.
Man, I learn something new every time I talk to Gordon. It's such a great time, and we always get into some deep little nuggets. I hope you took a bunch of things from that interview. If you're looking for his free resource, if you do podcast interviews for your show, you have to grab his free lawyer drafted podcast guest release. It's the release that I use for all of my interviews. I use it for every person that appears on my show. It secures their consent and understanding of your rights and their rights related to their appearance. You can download it for free. Go to podcastrelease.com. It's super easy. Podcastrelease.com. You can get it right there. Would you like my help to become that sought after authority in your niche? I'd love to audit your podcast. You've published all the episodes. You've stayed consistent. You know the content is good, and yet you're not getting the results you're looking for. You feel like you're spending all this time, money, and energy in your podcast and not seeing the returns. You're not becoming the sought after authority in your niche, that thought leader you want to be. People are listening, but they're not taking action. I understand the struggle. A lot of podcasters come to me for help with those very things. But just publishing your podcast every week, creating that consistency, that alone doesn't create the authority. It's the intentional leadership that does. It's following a structured plan. So if you're ready to turn your podcast into an authority engine and not just more content, if you'd like to move from being the best kept secret into being that sought after authority, let me audit your podcast. I'll go through an entire episode. We will sit down. We'll uncover your authority positioning problem. We'll develop a plan to help you succeed, and we'll see how I can support you to develop and achieve those podcast goals. You can find it all over at podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. That's podcasttalentcoach.com/coaching. That link is also in the show notes. I'd love to help you out. Let's make you the authority you deserve to be. On the next episode, we're going to talk to Danielle Weil. She has written dozens of 6- and 7-figure launches. She's written the copy for them, and they've generated over $170 million for clients. It has been fantastic. We're going to discover how to get into flow that will help you create fun, repeatable, big money launches without the burnout. Danielle's also going to share the most common mistakes that most coaches make when launching and how you can overcome those setbacks. That's all on the next episode. Until then, step into your authority, and we'll see you next time.